Safety top of mind in a meeting between the intra-city student council and members of the Board of Education in Green Bay.
That's right. It's one of the topics is implementing a safety ambassador in schools in Green Bay School District. Maria Parmigiani has more on the goals of this meeting and what else they're working on.
Understanding why it's happening and, being transparent and communication with everybody.
Wednesday morning, the intra-city student council met with Green Bay school board members to talk about safety concerns in schools.
Today we discussed about implementing our new council that we're starting, which is the School Safety Ambassador program. So what our council aims to do is to help with district leadership to work with them and then help with implementing if we have new safety procedures, helping plan drills, and bringing student perspective to some of the things that they do on the district level.
The conversation around possible changes and additions to the district's safety plan has been consistent since September when a student allegedly brought a gun to Preble High School.
The group is in response to the entire situation. The incident happened at Preble, the community roundtable, other things that have happened at board meetings where the students have wanted to voice their concerns.
Students that will be part of the first school safety ambassadors say they're happy to have a voice in the matter because they're the ones who this affects.
The school district does a great job of listening. All the ideas that have been discussed so far have been developed from the community roundtable. So they sat down, sort through the list, and then we're bringing things to the table, and then from there it would vote on them.
We have some amazing students in our district, and we have to recognize that their voice matters and the things that are happening in our buildings are affecting them. So why wouldn't we ask them what they think, and why wouldn't we ask them to be a part of the leadership of what we're doing in our buildings?
These safety ambassadors will be in addition to the district's safety plan, which includes panic buttons and lockdown drills.
We have a system called Centegix. It's a panic button. It's a wearable panic button that all of our staff wear.
For WBAY, Maria Parmigiani, Action 2 News.